Hey folks, if you're looking for an in-depth review, you're in the right place. And today, I'll be talking about a gift viewer LLC sent me, specifically TiGames action-centric Metroidvania, F.I.S.T, Forged in Shadow Torch. But was this title a knockout, or was this experience pure torture? I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. Torch City. Once it had been a source of opportunity and hope to its F.I.S.T denizens, but now it exists in a state of martial law, imposed by the cybernetic Iron Dogs ever since their victory in the war. Some, of course, still did their best to fight the good fight, carving out a base in the far reaches of the Western Range or joining the underground movement in the city. But for Rayton,
enough.
The war's best left behind. Or it should have been, until his friend Ursa was imprisoned, forcing him to take up old arms and finally join the fight. A journey that will soon escalate from jailbreaks to outright rebellion and a search for a mysterious artifact known as the Spark that could change everything. Summary aside, however, I actually found F.I.S.T's narrative to be fairly charming, in large part because, despite its premise of furry freedom fighters fighting against a fascist roboticized oppressor, it takes itself fairly seriously and provides a fair amount of space for its narrative, both in dialogue segments as well as cutscenes. All in all, I'd say the story does a decent job of gradually expanding on the world, especially as it progresses along, and even NPCs in remote regions are influenced by your actions. That said, I'll be the first to admit that it's far from flawless. A number of times throughout the experience, you'll find yourself encountering cutscenes where the spoken and written dialogue don't match, playing out in very different orders, which can be a bit jarring to witness. There's also the matter of the actual game's conclusion. It just feels a bit abrupt insofar as its build-up and the resolution and the aftermath, and you never really get a good snapshot of what exactly was going to happen. It's implied, but yeah. Still, those are some fairly minor nitpicks, which means it's about time to tackle the crunchy gameplay parts, and there's a fair amount to cover here. First off, while F.I.S.T is a Metroidvania, the detail placed into its combat behooves me to speak about that first, as it plays out like a brawler with a focus on stylish combos. Well, okay, your initial loadout is fairly straightforward, as the gauntlet you start out with has a relatively limited combo list. That said, it's not long into the game before you'll begin to acquire more, since the coins enemies drop can be spent at save points in order to further flesh out your moves, providing you an expanded combo list and even super moves to burn gauge on. There are some limitations here, since you'll need to find data discs as a form of a limited currency, but in any case, this complexity is then further compounded as you progress deeper into the game, since you'll eventually gain access to another pair of weapons, which each fulfill very different niches in combat. The drill, for instance, deals an absolutely ludicrous amount of damage if you can get an enemy to stand still, since each hit in a combo can be prolonged. The whip, on the other hand, provides you a solid mid-range option as well as the ability to effectively gap close, which is made especially interesting since you're able to freely swap between all three weapons in the middle of combat, allowing you to do some fairly intricate combos, which are then further supported by your gradual acquisition of mobility moves, since things like the double jump and dash help a great deal insofar as maintaining pressure or even evasive options. Admittedly, this can initially feel a bit excessive in the earlier combat encounters, especially on normal, since basic combos will suffice. That said, there is a surprisingly broad assortment of enemies you can encounter, as well as deadlier variants of earlier ones. And given that you don't get damage upgrades to the entirety of your kit, save for your charge attacks and supers, the ability to chain hits allows you a decent means of isolating and eliminating problematic foes. That said, the point in time where it really pulls its weight the most is during the various boss, mini-boss, and hidden encounters crammed into this game. There's a lot of these to encounter, and while some do make repeat appearances, there's also an ample amount of unique ones who will thoroughly test your abilities. Being able to stagger a boss and pull it into an extended combo to decisively dent its health pool, especially as they start to rock multiple health bars and phases, definitely becomes more meaningful, and that's without tackling the sheer hell that is the hidden boss rush mode, which, Jesus Christ. If you're of the mindset that the main game was too easy, this will definitely provide you your money's worth, given it offers you the opportunity to go toe-to-toe with every normal boss in the game, as well as unique ultra variants, provided you can conquer the arenas they're associated with. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the gadget system, though this one actually falls into a bit of an odd spot. See, gadgets make use of a very limited meter, which only replenishes by using save points, certain uncommon enemy drops, and enemy executions provided you have the upgrade purchased. Which actually winds up feeling fairly important since this resource is shared between 4 distinct combat abilities, namely your initial Estus Flask-like heal, which can be held down to chug a second shot faster, an omnidirectional parry that requires no real timing, a homing rocket, and a decoy. Even at their base functionality, they're all fairly useful, but the real tactical element here is the simple fact that using one essentially deprives you of a charge needed for another. Which begs the question, do you need a parry to stagger a boss and open them up for a reprisal, or the heal more? How about just emptying a missile launcher into them at the end of a combo in order to finish things off? It's definitely a tactical consideration, and the fact that all of these elements of your kit can be upgraded by exploring the map, further increasing how efficient they are, just makes this decision a bit trickier. Which, right, it's about time to talk shop about the exploration in F.I.S.T, and quite frankly, I think it's quite well done. The game does a very good job of introducing a somewhat constant stream of mobility options to play with, gradually unlocking your ability to explore the world. What's more, the way your weapons played into this was actually rather neat. Essentially, they all serve as keys to certain doors. That said, the latter 2 weapons also have additional nuances. The whip, for instance, allows you to grapple around things, whereas the drill provides you the ability to float on air jets and grants you improved underwater mobility, allowing you to engage in underwater segments in a relatively painless fashion. Quite frankly, the level design is so solid, it's to the point where they can incorporate an entire area without any combat and a sole focus on platforming and obstacles, and still provide an interesting area to navigate. Sure, I'll concede that the pathways don't branch as openly as some may hope, and that by and large, your access to areas will feel relatively linear. That said, I generally found the sheer amount of hidden content in each area that I could access during my first run, as well as future visits, to feel fairly rewarding. And there's something to be said also about just how porous the map feels as you slowly make everything more interconnected. Plus, slowly acquiring more chunks of health bar, super meter, or precious limited gadget juice were all hard-earned upgrades which went a long way to improving my survivability and my enjoyment of the game. That, or the data discs need to unlock more combo abilities, yeah, that's all exploration stuff. What's more, the map does a very good job of marking hidden objects you found but couldn't access, indicating the overall percentage of an area you've explored, as well as hinting where secret passages may start, provided you're attentive and stare closely at the points where the surroundings don't simply fill in on a given passage. Something that made me feel very grateful for, all those shortcuts that interconnect each region, the fast travel system you unlock, and the fact that enemies don't simply respawn when you leave a room, allowing me the means to roam fairly freely once I've cleared an area, at least for a little while. Altogether, this helped a lot in my quest to hunt down those collectibles in the games, and there is a fair number, both tucked away in hidden nooks, platforming challenges, or clever little puzzles. I'm not just talking about the stat boosters either. For instance, there's the posters, which can be turned in to unlock variant weapon skins, as well as hidden seeds, which can be turned into a specific NPC for oodles of cash, as well as more power-ups for your stats, and other odds and ends beside. In fact, there's actually a few extra ones to be found beyond the amount you need just to facilitate finishing off that side quest, which I found very forgiving. And speaking of side quests, that's not the crux of it either. While relatively sparse, there's a few things to dabble in, with my favorite being a combo training section, which, while challenging, does a more than adequate job of teaching you how to effectively weave combos together using a weapon's innate skill set, as well as linking them together with their peers. It's good stuff and pretty flashy to boot. Speaking of which, F.I.S.T is a treat visually. When I booted it up, I didn't expect the overall quality of graphics to extend from the opening screen to the cutscenes and the gameplay itself, but well, yeah, it provides a very impressive showing. Character animations are smooth during combat, and the attacks are actually well telegraphed, which matters a great deal in a combat-focused game like this. Something which I should also mention makes using the secret parry move viable, since while it lacks the limited charges of the gadget, it requires you to tilt your controller into the path of an oncoming attack with some fairly precise timing. Also, watching how fluidly the characters move, whether it be the executions, which are contextual based on enemy and weapons, or the in-game cutscenes, is just a load of fun. Also, this aesthetic care extends to the sound department too. The game's almost fully voice acted, and while there might be a few technical hiccups here and there, the overall quality is good, as is the OST, which has a very broad gamut of tracks to listen to, and if there's a track you're especially fond of, you can unlock the environmental ones by getting 100% exploration for a given area and talking to a specific NPC. In any case, that brings us to the conclusion, and overall I have to say, I really enjoyed my time with F.I.S.T, specifically the gameplay. That's not to say I don't mind the story. Again, I think it was charming in how seriously it took itself and the overall cinematic take in its presentation. There's also some moments where it is unintentionally quite funny, but what truly hooked me was the combat and exploration. There was just something intensely satisfying about slowly mastering my offensive and defensive capabilities until I was weaving between rooms full of attacks and doling out deadly combos. And hell, I really appreciated the introduction of the parry moves never obliged me to use them. They simply provided an alternate means of creating openings or surviving attacks that would have otherwise caused severe issues. And had the benefit of being able to completely derail a boss's attempt to combo me if I managed to get a recovery frame midway through. And the actual act of exploring the world just felt good. While this game is fairly vast, it didn't feel like it was dragging its feet or padding itself, and managed to provide a decent sense of identity to each of its environs, and its platforming challenges were fairly satisfying to master without ever incorporating any that felt utterly unfair to interact with. I honestly love this game to such a vast degree that I can safely call it a crit hit, because I really do recommend you folks give it a gander. There's a lot to do in it, and there's just some great moments to experience, like when you start encountering F.I.S.T's unique take on mimics. But yeah, that's my spiel. I think I've said everything other than while I play through the entire of this game with a controller, you do have keyboard options and can even bind keys to your mouse like the light and heavy attack buttons. I just didn't feel the need to tweak the default controller options since they worked quite well for me. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell. For the Discord savvy folks, there's a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, in the video description, and my Patreon so you can support me and the other members of Crit Hit. Also to my Twitch if you want to see me get dunked on in indie games live. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.